The conference room fell silent when she walked in. Not the respectful kind of silence that greets a decorated officer, but the awkward, questioning kind that hangs in the air like smoke after a misfire. Admiral Garrett Hutchins didn't look up from his briefing folder immediately, but his jaw tightened in a way that suggested he already knew what he'd see. A woman. Not just any woman, but one wearing a flight suit that looked like it had seen better days. Patches faded from too many suns over too many deserts. Her hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow still managed to look defiant. Captain Vera Kincaid, call sign unspoken, stood at attention near the door while the room full of Navy SEALs, intelligence officers, and Air Force tacticians pretended to study their tablets. She'd seen this before. The slight head tilts, the exchanged glances. The unspoken question that always hovered just behind military courtesy. What's she doing here? Hutchins finally raised his eyes. He was a legend, the kind of SEAL whose name got whispered in training compounds and officer clubs from Coronado to Bagram. 3 silver stars, a Navy Cross, the kind of man who'd led teams into places that didn't exist on maps and came back with everyone alive. He set down his folder with deliberate care, the kind of movement that made subordinates nervous, and leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked in the stillness. "Captain Kincaid," he said, and his voice carried the gravel of 1,000 tactical briefs. "Your file says you've logged over 2,000 flight hours, combat zones across 3 theaters, multiple commendations." He paused, and in that pause lived every question mark she'd faced since pinning on her wings. "But I'm not seeing a current squadron assignment. Says here you've been." "What? Teaching? At Pensacola?" Someone coughed. It might have been a laugh strangled at birth. Vera kept her face neutral, a skill she'd perfected over 15 years of proving herself in a world that kept asking for credentials she'd already earned twice over. "That's correct, sir. Primary flight instruction. Before that, I was with the 428th Fighter Squadron. A-10s. Close air support." "Right." Hutchins tapped his pen against the table, 3 sharp clicks that sounded like judgment. "And your call sign?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Call signs were earned, not chosen. They were stories compressed into syllables, legends miniaturized into something you could shout over the radio when the world was burning and seconds mattered more than minutes. Good ones were badges of honor. Bad ones were scars you wore forever. Vera met his eyes without flinching. "Phoenix, sir." The morning had started differently, 3 days earlier, in a 2-bedroom apartment in Pensacola, where sippy cups outnumbered coffee mugs, and the only decorations were crayon drawings held to the refrigerator by magnets shaped like fighter jets. Vera had been awake since 4:30, not because of any alarm, but because her daughter Maya had crawled into bed sometime after midnight, tiny feet cold against Vera's shins, whispering about monsters in the closet. There were no monsters. Just shadows cast by streetlights through Venetian blinds, the ordinary terrors of being 6 years old in a world that suddenly had only one parent. She'd made oatmeal while Maya sat at the kitchen table in Princess Jasmine pajamas, swinging legs that didn't quite reach the floor, asking questions that had no good answers. "When's Daddy coming home?" Not if. When. Because Maya still believed in certainties, in promises kept, in a world where deployment cycles ended and everyone returned. Vera had learned differently. Captain James Kincaid's helicopter had gone down over the Hindu Kush 14 months ago, and the line between missing and gone had blurred into something that kept her awake most nights, even when Maya didn't. "Soon, baby," she'd said, the lie tasting like ash. The phone call had come while she was brushing Maya's hair, working through tangles with the patience of someone who'd learned that some knots couldn't be rushed. Unknown number. Virginia area code. She'd almost let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer, some instinct honed by years of waiting for calls that changed everything. "Captain Kincaid, this is Colonel Morrison, SOCOM Operations. I need you in Virginia Beach by 1800 tomorrow. This is not a request." No preamble, no explanation, just coordinates and a timeline, the military's way of saying your life just shifted without asking permission. She'd stared at Maya's reflection in the bathroom mirror, at the trust in those brown eyes that looked so much like James's, and felt the weight of impossible choices pressing down like G-forces in a dive. Her mother had driven over within the hour. Patricia Kincaid née Morgan, 63 years of steel wrapped in sensible cardigans, who'd raised 3 children while her husband deployed to Vietnam twice and never once complained where anyone could hear. She'd taken one look at Vera's face and simply nodded, already mentally preparing for however many days of bedtime stories and packed lunches this would require. Now Vera stood in a classified briefing room watching Admiral Hutchins process her call sign, watching him do the math that everyone eventually did. Phoenix, the bird that rose from ashes, the mythological creature that died and returned. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. She'd earned it the hard way during her 3rd deployment when her A-10 had taken an RPG hit that shredded her right engine and most of her hydraulics over Helmand Province. She'd glided that wounded warthog 23 miles to friendly territory on nothing but skill and stubbornness, crash-landed in a dry riverbed, walked away with a concussion, and a story that other pilots still told at the bar. But she knew that wasn't what Hutchins was thinking about. He was looking at her the way everyone in this room was looking at her, seeing not the decorated combat pilot but the single mother, the widow, the woman who probably should be home, where the military's invisible hand usually guided female officers after tragedy struck. The Pentagon was good at that, at quietly shuffling people into positions that looked like promotions but felt like shelves. "Phoenix," Hutchins repeated, and something shifted in his voice. Not warmth exactly, but a recognition, like he'd suddenly remembered she was a pilot and not just a problem to solve. "You flew support for SEAL Team 7. Afghanistan, 2022. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, sir. Operation Copper Dagger, extraction from Marja." "That was you." This from a SEAL major sitting 3 seats down, younger than Hutchins but with the same weathered look they all got after too many deployments. He was staring at her now with something closer to interest. "You put 30 Mike danger clothes on a building we were pinned in. I mean danger clothes. We felt the concussion through the walls." "You called for it," Vera said simply. "I delivered it." The room's temperature changed, subtly but unmistakably. A few officers sat up straighter. One pulled out a tablet and started scrolling through something, probably her file, with fresh eyes. Even Hutchins's expression shifted, the skepticism not vanishing but recalibrating, adjusting to new data. He opened a different folder, this one stamped with red classification markings that suggested the conversation was about to get interesting. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room. 6 days ago, we lost contact with a reconnaissance element in northern Syria. 4 operators, embedded with Kurdish forces near the Turkish border. Last transmission indicated they'd stumbled onto something significant. Chemical weapons cache, possibly sarin, definitely not supposed to exist per the treaties. Then nothing. Radio silence for 96 hours. Vera felt her pulse quicken but kept her face neutral. This was why they'd pulled her from flight instruction, why they'd classified the brief at a level that made presidential briefings look casual. "You want to send in a recovery team." "Already sent," Hutchins said flatly. 48 hours ago, SEAL Team 3 full squadron. They hit the last known coordinates, found the Kurdish forces dead, executed, professional job, not insurgents, but no sign of our operators. Then the rescue team started taking fire from Turkish positions, not warning shots. Actual anti-aircraft batteries lighting up. F-18s had to pull back. The Turks are claiming we violated their airspace, that they have no knowledge of any Americans in the area, and NATO is having a diplomatic heart attack." He slid a satellite photo across the table. Vera picked it up, studied the terrain. Mountains, river valleys, dirt roads that probably turned to mud soup in winter. Hard country for helicopters, harder for anything that couldn't take a hit. "You need low and slow," she said. "Something that can absorb ground fire and keep flying. something that won't show up on Turkish radar as a threat. We need a warthog, Hutchins confirmed. And we need a pilot who knows how to fly one in a denied environment where the rules of engagement are going to be. He paused, searching for the right word. Complicated. You'll be supporting a team that technically isn't there in airspace we technically can't enter to recover operators who technically don't exist. The Turks will shoot at you. The Syrians might shoot at you. And if you go down, the United States government will deny all knowledge. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush diamonds. This was the moment. The offer that wasn't really an offer. The mission that required someone skilled enough to pull it off and expendable enough that their loss wouldn't trigger an international incident. Vera thought about Maya, about crayon drawings in princess pajamas, and a daughter who'd already lost one parent. She thought about Patricia's face when she dropped Maya off, the unspoken understanding that some calls were louder than others. She thought about James, about the last time she'd seen him alive, about how he'd kissed her goodbye at 04:30 on a Tuesday and never came home. She thought about the 4 operators in Syria, about their families waiting by phones, about the particular hell of not knowing. "When do I leave?" she asked. The briefing lasted another 3 hours. Maps spread across tables like autopsy reports. Satellite imagery that showed enemy positions marked in red, friendly forces in blue, and vast areas of nothing marked in gray because nobody really knew who controlled what in northern Syria anymore. The intelligence officer, a pale Air Force major named Hawthorne who looked like he lived in basement server rooms, walked them through the situation with the enthusiasm of someone presenting a PowerPoint on spreadsheet management. The operators were part of a joint task force monitoring chemical weapons proliferation, Hawthorne explained, laser pointer dancing across a topographical map. They were operating under Turkish awareness but not necessarily approval. Things have been tense since the U.S. pulled back from the border region. The Turks see Kurdish forces as terrorists. We see them as allies against ISIS remnants. It's complicated. "It's always complicated," muttered the SEAL major who'd recognized her earlier. His name was Taggart, and he had the look of someone who'd spent more time in combat zones than stateside. "What's not complicated is that we've got 4 guys who need extraction, and a 72-hour window before this whole thing goes from bad to totally fucked. After that, they're either dead or in Turkish custody, and both options are political nightmares." Hutchins nodded. "Captain Kincaid, you'll be carrying a SEAL rescue element. 6 operators, minimal gear. Your job is to get them in, provide close air support during the extraction, and get everyone out. The Turks have deployed S-400 systems to the border. Anything flying high and fast is going to get swatted. But a Warthog low-level following terrain," he shrugged, "might just look like another piece of junk flying through the valley, might not trigger their alert thresholds. Or they might shoot anyway," Vera said calmly, "and find out afterward what they hit." "There's that possibility," Hutchins admitted. "Which is why we're sending 1 aircraft, 1 pilot, minimal signature, minimal risk. If you draw fire and have to abort, the rescue team will exfiltrate overland. But we're betting on surprise and the fact that the A-10's profile looks enough like commercial traffic at low altitude to buy us the seconds we need." Vera studied the map, calculating distances and fuel loads, trying to visualize the approach. The A-10 Thunderbolt II wasn't pretty. Pilots joked that it was built around the gun, a massive GAU-8 Avenger that could chew through tanks like they were aluminum cans. But it was tough, redundant systems everywhere, designed to take hits and keep flying. She'd once brought one home with half a wing missing. The Warthog didn't care about looking good. It cared about the mission. "I'll need 2 hours with the aircraft before we launch," she said. "Pre-flight, systems check, weapons load verification. And I want to meet the rescue team. I need to know their capabilities, their experience with air support." "They're SEALs," Taggart said a little defensively. "They know how to work with air." "I'm sure they do," Vera replied evenly, meeting his eyes. "But I need to know them. I need to know how they think, how they communicate under stress. Because if things go sideways up there, I'm going to be making split-second decisions about where to put ordnance, and I can't afford to second-guess whether they can handle danger-close fire." Hutchins watched this exchange with interest, then nodded. "You'll have your 2 hours. Major Taggart will introduce you to the team. Wheels up at 0300 tomorrow. That gives you 18 hours to prep, sleep if you can, and make peace with the fact that this mission doesn't officially exist." He stood, and everyone else followed suit, the scrape of chairs echoing in the stark room. "Captain Kincaid, one more thing." She waited. "Why'd you say yes?" Hutchins asked quietly. "You've got a daughter. You could have said no, gone back to teaching. Nobody would have blamed you." Vera thought about that question, about all the easy answers she could give. Duty, honor, service, all true but not complete. She thought about Maya asking when Daddy was coming home, about the lie she told every time because the truth was too sharp for a 6-year-old to hold. She thought about 4 operators in Syria whose families were asking the same question, sitting by phones, praying for updates. "Because someone has to," she said finally. "And because if it was me out there, I'd want someone to come." Hutchins studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. His grip was firm, the handshake of one warrior to another. "Bring them home, Phoenix." "Always do, sir." She left the briefing room and walked through corridors that smelled like floor polish and urgency, past offices where young officers stared at computer screens and planned operations that would never make the news. Outside, the Virginia Beach sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with flying in the first place. Up there, above the politics and complications, there was just sky and speed, and the simple mathematics of lift and thrust. Up there she could be purely herself. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Maya wants to say goodnight." She found a quiet corner called home and listened to her daughter's voice recounting elaborate stories about what they'd had for dinner and how Grandma let her stay up an extra 15 minutes. Normal things, beautiful things, the kind of things worth fighting for. "I love you, baby," Vera said when Maya finally wound down. "Be good for Grandma, okay?" "When are you coming home, Mommy?" "Soon," she promised, and hoped this time it wasn't a lie. The A-10 was waiting for her at 0200, squatting on the tarmac like a malevolent toad. Vera loved it immediately, the way she always loved these ugly, perfect machines. Ground crews swarmed over it, loading ordnance and checking systems, their movements precise and practiced. AGM-65 Mavericks under the wings for armor, rockets for area suppression. And the gun, always the gun. 7 barrels rotating at 70 rounds per second, carrying enough depleted uranium to turn any ground target into memory. Chief Warrant Officer Jackson, the crew chief, met her at the ladder. He was older, gray threading through his hair, with the confident calm of someone who'd prepped 1,000 aircraft for 1,000 missions. "Captain, she's ready. I personally checked every system twice. Fuel topped off, weapons hot, and I put fresh coffee in the thermos because you'll need it." "Thanks, Chief." She climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit that felt like coming home. Switches and gauges surrounded her, each one a promise of what the aircraft could do. She ran through her pre-flight methodically, muscle memory from 10,000 hours, making the checklist almost meditative. Hydraulics, check. Avionics, check. Targeting systems, check. Everything green, everything ready. The rescue team arrived 30 minutes later. 6 SEALs, all business, moving with the efficient economy of operators who'd worked together long enough to communicate in glances. Their team leader, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, climbed up to brief her personally. He was compact, maybe 5'9", with dark eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. "Captain," he said, voice rough from too many years of shouting orders over gunfire. "My boys are good to go. We'll be out of your aircraft in under 12 seconds. Extraction should take no more than 4 minutes on the ground. When we call for exfil, we'll pop smoke. Green means all friendly, red means we're under contact. Yellow means wounded, need immediate air support." "Understood," Vera said. What's your comfort level with close air support? Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Phoenix, I was at Marja. I know what you can do. If I call for fire, I trust you to put it exactly where it needs to go. That changed things, she nodded. Then let's go get your people. The takeoff was smooth, the Warthog climbing into pre-dawn darkness with the steady confidence of an aircraft that didn't care about aerodynamics. Vera banked east, hugging the deck, keeping her altitude below 1,000 feet as she crossed into Syrian airspace. No lights, no fanfare, just another shadow moving through the night. Her radar warning receiver stayed quiet, a small mercy. The Turks weren't tracking her yet, which meant their electronic warfare suite was doing its job. Phoenix 1, this is Watchdog. The AWACS controller's voice crackled in her ear. You are cleared into the box. Current intelligence shows minimal enemy air activity. Ground forces are concentrated near the objective. Recommend approach from the northwest. Use the river valley for concealment. Copy Watchdog. Northwest approach, Valley Run. She adjusted her heading, eyes scanning instruments and horizon simultaneously. The landscape below was black, just occasional lights marking villages that had somehow survived years of civil war. She thought about the people down there, waking up to another day of uncertainty, and felt a kinship she couldn't quite name. We're all just trying to survive, she thought. We're all just trying to get home. The objective appeared on her display 30 minutes later, a cluster of buildings in a valley that looked like 100 other clusters of buildings she'd struck over the years. But this one held 4 Americans, or their bodies, and a diplomatic crisis that could shatter alliances. No pressure. Phoenix 1, Kilo 6, Rodriguez's voice calm despite what was coming. We are 30 seconds from insert. Target area looks quiet, too quiet. Copy Kilo 6. I've got eyes on. No movement detected. She armed her weapon systems, felt the familiar thrum of the targeting computer coming online. Below, the Warthog's shadow raced across moonlit rock, silent and lethal. Then the world exploded in light and noise, and the mission went to hell. The first indication was her radar warning receiver screaming, multiple acquisition radars painting her aircraft from 3 different directions. Then tracers, green and white streams of anti-aircraft fire rising from positions that weren't supposed to be there, reaching up like fingers trying to pluck her from the sky. Vera reacted on instinct, braking hard left, deploying flares that bloomed white-hot in her wake, confusing heat seekers that hadn't launched yet but probably would. Phoenix 1 taking fire, she transmitted, voice steady despite the adrenaline spike. Multiple AAA positions northeast and southeast of objective. Kilo 6, abort, abort, abort. Negative, Phoenix, Rodriguez replied, and she could hear rotor noise behind his voice. The helicopter was already descending, already committed. We're going in. Need you to suppress those guns. No time to argue. Vera rolled inverted, dove toward the nearest gun position, her targeting reticle dancing across the screen. Lined it up, squeezed. The GAU-8 roared, a sound like fabric tearing at the molecular level, and the ground below erupted in fire as depleted uranium rounds shredded vehicles and gun emplacements. She pulled up hard, G-forces pressing her into the seat, turned for another pass. Good hits, Phoenix, someone called, probably Taggart watching from the SEAL helicopter. Northeast guns are down, but we've got company. 3 vehicles moving fast toward the objective. Technicals, probably Syrian army. She spotted them on her next pass, Toyota trucks with heavy machine guns mounted in the beds, racing down a dirt road trailing dust. Not American hostages, not friendlies. She selected rockets, fired a salvo that bracketed the lead vehicle, sent it cartwheeling into a ditch. The other 2 scattered but not fast enough. Her gun found them, precise bursts that turned machinery into wreckage. Below, the SEAL helicopter touched down in a clearing near the target building. 6 operators poured out, moving with the fluid violence of professionals. Rodriguez's voice came through clearly. Kilo 6 on the ground, moving to objective, encountering resistance. Then the sharp crack of gunfire, small arms fire that sounded distant through her headset but was probably deafening on the ground. Vera circled overhead, scanning for threats, finger hovering over her weapon's release. Every instinct screamed at her to get lower, to provide tighter support, but the tracers still rising from the remaining gun positions suggested that was a quick way to join James in whatever came after. She'd learned the hard way that dead pilots couldn't help anyone. Kilo 6, I have eyes on your position, she transmitted. Multiple heat signatures in the building east of your location. Could be hostiles, could be civilians. Unknown. Copy Phoenix, we're on it. Rodriguez's team was already moving, breaching doors with explosive charges that lit up her infrared camera like flashbulbs. More gunfire sustained now, the kind that meant contact. She watched helplessly from above, unable to intervene without risking hitting her own people. Then Rodriguez's voice again, strained but controlled. We've got them. 4 operators, all alive, 2 wounded. Moving to exfil now. Phoenix, we need a path cleared. Enemy reinforcements coming from the north, at least 2 trucks, maybe more. She was already turning, already lining up. The trucks appeared in her targeting display, headlights cutting through dust, probably carrying more Syrian soldiers than she wanted to think about. She fired a Maverick, watched the missile streak down with unnatural precision, impact in a fireball that made her cameras flare white. The second truck tried to brake, tried to turn, but her gun found it anyway, walking fire across the road until nothing moved. Path's clear, Kilo 6. You've got 30 seconds before more company arrives. Copy that, exfil in progress. She watched the SEALs load into their helicopter, moving with urgent efficiency, carrying 2 wounded operators who seemed able to move but needed support. The helicopter lifted off, rotors beating the air into submission, and Vera breathed for what felt like the first time in minutes. They were up. They were clear. Mission accomplished. Then her missile warning system howled, and everything changed again. The threat display showed it clearly. Surface-to-air missile, probably SA-18, launched from the southeast, tracking. Turkish position. They'd finally decided she was worth shooting at, or they just figured out what was happening and didn't care about the political fallout. The missile was fast, a Mach 2 pencil of explosive intent rising toward her on a column of fire. Vera didn't think. She reacted, thousands of hours of training compressing into pure instinct. She dumped all her remaining flares, broke hard right, shoved the throttle forward despite the engine temperature already redlining. The Warthog responded sluggishly, weighed down by remaining ordnance, moving like a truck when she needed a sports car. The missile adjusted, tracking through her countermeasures, and for a crystalline moment she understood exactly how her husband had felt in those final seconds, watching the ground rush up with nothing left to do but ride it down. Then the missile detonated, close enough that her aircraft shook like a dog shaking water, close enough that shrapnel peppered her right wing and sent warning lights cascading across her instrument panel. Hydraulics failing. Engine temperature critical, right landing gear showing damage. But she was still flying, still in control, and that was enough. Phoenix 1 hit, she transmitted, voice surprisingly steady. I'm okay, aircraft's damaged but flyable, egressing north. Copy Phoenix, the AWACS controller responded, suddenly all business. We have medical standing by. Can you make it to the border? She checked her gauges, did the math. Fuel was okay. Engine was marginal. Hydraulics were dying, but she still had manual reversion, could fly the old-fashioned way if necessary. 20 miles to friendly territory. 10 minutes at her current speed. She'd made it home on worse. Affirmative, watchdog, I'll make it. And she did, nursing the wounded Warthog across the border into Iraq, coaxing it to a forward operating base where ground crew rushed out with fire extinguishers and trauma bags. She shut down the engine, climbed out on legs that wanted to shake but didn't, and found Rodriguez waiting at the bottom of the ladder. Hell of a job, Captain, he said, and there was respect in his voice, real and unfeigned. Behind him, his team was unloading the 4 recovered operators, and she could see them now. Faces pale with stress, uniforms torn but alive, all 4 alive. "Just another day at the office," she replied, but her hands were shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting like a train. Rodriguez saw it, said nothing, just nodded and walked away to give her space. She thought about Maya, about going home, about having to explain the new scars this mission would leave. She thought about James, wondering if he'd felt this same combination of triumph and exhaustion after his operations. She thought about the call sign Phoenix, about dying and returning, about how many times someone could burn up and rebuild before there was nothing left. Then she called her mother, told her she was okay, listened to Maya's voice say, "Mommy," with pure joy, and decided that burning was worth it. The debrief took 6 hours. Hutchins, Taggart, intelligence officers, and brass she didn't recognize filled another conference room while Vera walked them through every moment of the mission. Her flight suit still smelled like jet fuel and burnt insulation, a particular perfume that would linger for days. She spoke clearly, precisely, keeping emotion out of it the way she'd been trained, but behind every word was the memory of how close it had been. The missile launch was unexpected, an Air Force colonel noted, studying satellite footage of the incident. The Turks claim it was an automated response to an unidentified aircraft in their engagement zone. They're apologizing through back channels, but publicly they're maintaining they did nothing wrong. "Of course they are," Hutchins said dryly. "Can't admit they nearly shot down an American pilot on a rescue mission. Bad for NATO relations." He looked at Vieira with something approaching approval. "Your evasion was textbook, Captain. Most pilots would have taken that hit center mass." "Most pilots fly aircraft that can outrun missiles," Vieira replied. "A-10s don't have that luxury. We learn to be tricky." That got a few chuckles, breaking tension. Taggart slid a folder across the table to her. "The 4 operators you extracted, they're stable, going to make full recoveries. They also wanted me to pass something along." He opened the folder, revealed a photo of 4 men in hospital beds, all giving thumbs up to the camera. On the whiteboard behind them, someone had written in neat letters, "Phoenix rises. Thanks for the ride." Vera stared at the photo, felt something tight in her chest loosen just slightly. This was why. This moment these lives saved, these families who wouldn't have to hear the words she'd heard about James. This was why she'd said yes, why she'd left Maya with her mother, why she'd flown into hell and somehow made it back. "Tell them they're welcome," she said quietly. "And tell them next time maybe pick a quieter neighborhood." More laughs, genuine now. Hutchins stood, signaling the debrief was over. "Captain Kincaid, you're released to return home. Take a few days, spend time with your daughter. We'll have your full after-action report in writing when you're ready." He paused, then added, "For what it's worth, you did good work. The kind of work that doesn't make headlines but changes everything for the people involved." "That's all I ever wanted, sir," Vera said, standing and saluting. She flew commercial back to Pensacola, which felt surreal after the A-10, all cramped seats and crying bobbies and flight attendants serving tiny sodas. Normal people going normal places, unaware that 3 days ago she'd been dodging missiles over Syria. She slept in fits, woke when turbulence hit, instinctively reaching for flight controls that weren't there. The man next to her asked if she was okay. She said she was fine, just a bad dream, and he nodded and went back to his spreadsheet. Her mother met her at the airport, Maya bouncing beside her like a coiled spring. Vera barely had time to drop her bag before her daughter launched into her arms, tiny hands grabbing tight, face buried in Vera's neck. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and crayons, the best smell in the world. "Mommy, you're home," Maya pulled back, eyes shining. "Did you fly really high? Did you see clouds?" "I flew very high," Vera confirmed, which was technically true even if the mission had been mostly low-level. "And I saw beautiful clouds, and I thought about you the whole time." Patricia watched this with eyes that knew too much, that saw through the smile to the weight underneath. Later, after Maya was in bed, they sat in the kitchen over tea and Patricia asked the question she'd been holding. Was it bad? Vera considered lying, considered the military wife's traditional response of nothing I can talk about. But her mother had earned honesty, had carried her own weight of worry through decades of military life. It was close, she admitted. Closer than I'd like, but we got everyone out. 4 men who get to go home to their families. Patricia nodded slowly, like you came home to yours. Like I came home to mine, Vera agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 women who understood that some things didn't need words, that presence was sometimes enough. Eventually Patricia stood, kissed Vera's forehead the way she had when Vera was Maya's age, and went to bed. Vera stayed in the kitchen, staring at Maya's crayon drawings on the refrigerator, each one a small masterpiece of childhood imagination. One showed a fighter jet with "Mommy" written in crooked letters above it, flying through impossibly blue sky. She traced the drawing with one finger, thinking about call signs and legacy, about what she was teaching Maya through action rather than words. Was she teaching resilience, courage, or just that sometimes people left and might not come back, that the sky was both freedom and danger? She didn't know. She just knew she'd do it again if called, would climb into that cockpit and fly into whatever hell needed flying into, because someone had to and she was good at it. The next morning she woke to Maya jumping on her bed, demanding pancakes and stories. Vera made both, inventing elaborate tales about friendly dragons and brave princesses that made Maya laugh until she hiccuped. They went to the park, fed ducks that complained about the quality of bread, built sandcastles that waves would eventually claim. Normal things, beautiful things, the kind of day that felt like absolution. Her phone buzzed with a text from Hutchins. Formal commendation approved. Silver star recommended. Well done, Phoenix. She read it twice, then deleted it. Maya didn't need to know about medals. She just needed to know her mother came home. That, Vera thought, was the only commendation that mattered. But word got around the way word always did in military circles. Within a week, her story had percolated through Navy networks, distilled into legend by the alchemy of retelling. The single mom who flew into denied airspace. The pilot who took a missile hit and kept flying. Phoenix, who lived up to her call sign. It reached Pensacola's flight training wing, where instructors who'd barely acknowledged her existence suddenly wanted to talk tactics, wanted to hear about Syrian air defenses, wanted to understand how she'd evaded that SA-18. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Chen, who'd been particularly dismissive of her assignment to instruction duty, found her in the ready room. He was younger than her, more recent combat experience, the kind of officer who wore his confidence like cologne. "Captain Kincaid," he said, and his tone had shifted from patronizing to cautious respect. "I heard about your mission, Syria. That was impressive work." "Thank you," Vera replied neutrally, unsure where this was going. Chen shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I owe you an apology, I thought. I made assumptions about why you were here, teaching instead of flying. I figured you'd lost your edge, that you were coasting toward retirement." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. You're not here because you can't hack it anymore. You're here because they needed someone to train the next generation, someone who knows what it actually takes." Vera felt something unknot inside her, a tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. "We all make assumptions," she said carefully. "The trick is recognizing them and adjusting." "Yeah," Chen agreed. "Well, consider me adjusted. If you ever want a guest lecture in my tactics class, share some of that Syria experience, the students would benefit. I know I would." After he left, Vera sat alone in the ready room, staring at the board where flight schedules were posted. Her name was there, teaching 4 classes this week, molding young pilots who'd eventually face their own missions, their own impossible choices. She thought about what Chen had said, about the assumption that teaching was somehow lesser than flying, and realized how wrong that was. Every student she trained might someday save lives because of something she taught them. That was legacy too, maybe more important than any single mission. The formal ceremony for her Silver Star came 6 weeks later, held at NAS Pensacola with enough brass to start a band. Maya attended, wearing a dress she'd picked out herself, purple with sparkles that caught the light. She didn't fully understand what was happening, just knew that Mommy was getting a medal and everyone was being very serious about it. Admiral Hutchins himself pinned the star to Vera's uniform, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd as he recounted the mission in carefully sanitized language that left out most of the classified details but captured the essence. Courage under fire, lives saved, duty above self. Vera stood at attention, feeling the weight of the medal, feeling Maya's eyes on her from the front row. This was complicated, being a warrior and a mother, being someone who flew into danger and someone who made pancakes shaped like hearts. But maybe that was okay. Maybe she didn't have to choose, didn't have to be one thing. Maybe she could be Phoenix, rising from ashes, and also just Vera, whose daughter thought she was magic. After the ceremony, families clustered around for photos and congratulations. Maya insisted on holding the medal. Handling it with the precious care of a child who understood it was important even if she didn't understand why. Patricia stood nearby, proud and terrified in equal measure, the expression of every military parent who'd ever watched their child walk into danger. Rodriguez approached with his team, all of them out of uniform, looking oddly normal in civilian clothes. "Captain," he said, shaking her hand, "my boys wanted to thank you personally." The SEALs surrounded her, these quiet professionals who'd seen the worst humanity could offer, and one by one they shook her hand or hugged her, words simple but sincere. "You saved our asses. Best close air support I've ever seen. Thank you." Maya watched this with wide eyes, sensing something important in these scarred men treating her mother with such respect. One of the rescued operators, a young petty officer named Sullivan with a fresh scar on his neck, crouched down to Maya's level. "Your mom's a hero," he told her seriously. "She came and got us when we were in trouble, flew through really bad weather, fought off bad guys, everything. We wouldn't be here without her." Maya processed this, then looked up at Vera with an expression that mixed awe and confusion. "You fight bad guys, Mommy." "Sometimes," Vera admitted, choosing honesty over comfortable lies. "When people need help, I fly to get them. That's my job." "Like a superhero." "Sort of, but with a really big plane." That satisfied Maya's 6-year-old logic. She turned back to Sullivan, utterly serious. "My mommy is the best pilot. She can fly anywhere." "Yeah, she can," Sullivan agreed, voice thick. "Yeah, she absolutely can." The months following the ceremony brought changes. Vera was offered a position with a Special Operations Aviation Unit, flying missions that would take her away from Maya more often but push her capabilities in ways flight instruction couldn't. She was offered promotion to major, with all the administrative responsibilities that entailed. She was offered speaking engagements, interviews, the kind of spotlight that made her skin crawl. She declined most of it, accepted the promotion because it came with better pay that Maya would need for college someday, but stayed at Pensacola teaching. Some people questioned that choice. Chen, now a friend rather than skeptic, asked about it over coffee in the officers' mess. "You could be commanding squadrons, Vera, flying operational missions. Instead, you're teaching kids how to land without killing themselves. Don't you want more?" Vera considered her answer carefully. "I want Maya to have a mother who comes home," she said finally. "I want to be there for parent-teacher conferences and dance recitals and all the ordinary things that James missed because he was being extraordinary somewhere else. I got lucky in Syria. Next time I might not. And what I'm doing here matters. Every pilot I train might be the one who saves lives someday because I taught them something crucial. That's not settling. That's multiplying impact." Chen nodded slowly. "When you put it that way, yeah, I get it." He paused, then added, "For what it's worth, you're the best instructor we have. The students are terrified of disappointing you, which means they actually learn." That made her laugh, surprising them both. "Terrified? I'm not that bad." You have standards, Chen corrected, and you hold people to them. In a world where everyone gets a participation trophy, that's radical. He stood, gathering his tray. Keep doing what you're doing, Phoenix. The Navy needs more like you. After he left, Vera sat finishing her coffee, thinking about standards and legacy and what it meant to be Phoenix. The call sign had started as a description of one moment, one crash landing and survival. But it had evolved into something larger, a symbol of resilience, of refusing to stay down, of transformation through fire. She died when James's helicopter went down, died to the person she'd been before, and risen as someone harder, sharper, more determined to make every flight count. But she'd also risen as a mother who wouldn't let tragedy define her daughter's childhood, who made pancakes and told stories and showed up. Both things were true. Both things were Phoenix. Her phone buzzed with a new message, this one from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then curiosity won. The text was brief. Captain Kincaid, this is Lieutenant Cassie Yun, currently at Fighter Training Squadron. I heard about your mission and your career. You're the reason I joined the Navy. Would love to buy you coffee sometime and hear your advice. Thank you for showing people like me we belong up there. Vera stared at the message for a long moment, feeling something shift in her chest. People like me. Women who'd fought for every inch of recognition, who'd proven themselves over and over in a profession that still sometimes acted surprised they existed. She thought about being young and determined, facing skepticism and worse, needing someone to look at and think, if she can do it, so can I. She typed back, coffee sounds good, let's talk flying. That evening, helping Maya with homework at the kitchen table, Vera felt a contentment that had nothing to do with medals or missions. Math problems and spelling words, the mundane magic of being present. Maya struggled with addition, frustrated when numbers didn't behave. Vera showed her tricks, ways to visualize, patient in the way combat had taught her. Break complex problems into manageable pieces, solve them one at a time, trust the process. I don't get it, Maya complained, close to tears. It's too hard. Everything's hard before it's easy, Vera said gently. Flying was hard for me at first too. I crashed the simulator 6 times before I figured it out, but I kept trying, kept learning, and eventually it clicked. Same with this. You just need practice. Maya looked up at her with those brown eyes so like James's. Did Daddy think things were hard too? The question hung in the air, unexpected and loaded. Vera chose her words carefully. Daddy thought lots of things were hard, but he never let hard stop him, and neither do you. You've got his determination, his heart. When something's difficult, you push through. That's what makes you special. Maya nodded, returned to her homework with renewed focus, and Vera felt the ghost of her husband's smile approvingly. This was how you honored the dead, by teaching the living to be brave, to persist, to rise when knocked down. This was Phoenix too. Lieutenant Yun turned out to be everything Vera hoped for in the next generation. Hungry, talented, unintimidated by the barriers still standing. They met at a coffee shop off base, civilian clothes making the conversation feel less formal. Yun was Korean-American, first-generation Navy, carrying the weight of family expectations along with her ambition to fly fighters. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, Yun confessed over espresso. Safe, respectable, better money. But I saw you at a career talk when I was in high school. You spoke about flying like it was freedom and purpose combined, and I knew that's what I wanted. Took me 6 years to convince them, but here I am. 6 years is a long time to fight, Vera observed. So is 15 years to become a legend, Yun countered. I've read your file, well, the unclassified parts, multiple combat deployments, decorations, that emergency landing in Helmand, and now Syria. You're exactly what I want to become. Vera felt the weight of that admiration, the responsibility of being someone's inspiration. The thing they don't tell you, she said carefully, is that the flying is the easy part. It's everything around it that's hard. Proving yourself over and over to people who think you're a liability, missing birthdays and holidays, losing people. She paused, thinking of James. The plane doesn't care if you're male or female, if you have kids or tattoos or whatever. The plane just responds to skill. But the institution still cares, and you have to be ready for that. I am, Yun said with the certainty of someone who hadn't been tested yet. I've been ready my whole life. Vera smiled. Then you'll be fine. Just remember, the goal isn't to be as good as the men. The goal is to be so good they can't ignore you, so skilled that your competence overwhelms their bias. Fly like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. And when you get your wings, when you earn your call sign, wear it proudly. You'll have earned it. They talked for 2 more hours, Vera sharing lessons learned through hard experience, Yun absorbing everything like a sponge. By the end, Vera felt something she hadn't expected: hope. The Navy was changing, slowly, pushed by people like Yun who refused to accept limitations. Maybe Maya's generation would grow up in a world where female combat pilots were normal, unremarkable, just pilots. That night, tucking Maya into bed, Vera told her a story about a young warrior who wanted to fly, but everyone said she couldn't. The warrior trained harder than anyone, proved herself in battle, and eventually became a legend. Maya listened with rapt attention, then asked, "Is that story about you, Mommy?" "It's about anyone who refuses to give up," Vera replied. "It could be about you someday if you want it to be." Maya considered this seriously. "I think I want to be a doctor or maybe a vet. I like animals." Vera laughed, kissed her forehead. "Then be the best doctor or vet you can be. Whatever you choose, be extraordinary." As she left Maya's room, she paused at the photo on the hallway wall, the one of her and James on their wedding day, young and impossibly optimistic, believing they'd have forever. "She's okay," Vera whispered to the photo. "We're okay. I'm keeping my promise, raising her right, teaching her to be strong. I hope wherever you are, you're proud." The silence that answered felt like benediction. Years passed in the way they do, measured in flight hours and Maya's growth spurts, in students taught and missions accomplished. Vera made major, then lieutenant colonel, rising through ranks not because she sought promotion, but because competence had a way of being recognized eventually. She continued teaching, mentored dozens of young pilots, watched them earn their wings and head to combat squadrons carrying lessons she'd imparted. Some came back to visit, shared their own stories of missions flown and challenges overcome. Each one was a vindication, proof that her choice to teach had ripples extending far beyond any single combat sortie. Maya grew from child to adolescent, asking harder questions about her father, about what he'd done and why, about whether courage was worth the cost. Vera answered as honestly as she could, never lying about the risks or the pain, but also never diminishing the importance of service. She wanted Maya to understand nuance, that heroism came with sacrifice, that sometimes people who loved you had to leave because duty demanded it. It was a delicate balance, teaching pride without glorifying war, honoring James without making him a saint. "Would you do it again?" Maya asked once, 15 years old and suddenly too perceptive. "If you knew Daddy would die, would you still have married him, still had me?" Vera had been chopping vegetables for dinner, and she set down the knife carefully before answering. "Yes," she said simply. "Every moment with your father was worth it, and you are the best thing I've ever done, better than any mission or medal. The pain of losing him is the price of having loved him, and I'd pay that price again." Maya nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears, and Vera knew she'd said the right thing, the true thing. They finished making dinner together in comfortable silence, the kind of closeness that didn't need words. When Maya turned 16, Vera took her flying for the first time. Not in a fighter, but in a small Cessna borrowed from the base flying club, gentle and forgiving and perfect for showing someone the beauty of flight without the terror. They climbed into cloudless sky, and Vera watched her daughter's face transform with wonder as the ground fell away and the horizon expanded into forever. "It's so quiet up here," Maya breathed, staring out at the patchwork landscape below. "That's what I love about it," Vera replied. Up here, everything's simple, just you, the plane, and physics. No complications, no politics, just the pure joy of defying gravity. She let Maya take the controls, talked her through a gentle turn, and watched her daughter's concentration as she tried to keep the wings level. It was like watching herself 25 years ago, that same intensity, that same determination. When they landed, Maya was grinning, high on adrenaline and accomplishment. "I get it now," she said. "Why you do this. Why Daddy did it. It's not about the danger or the glory, it's about this feeling, this freedom." "Yeah," Vera agreed, "it's about this." Maya didn't pursue flying professionally. She went to veterinary school like she'd always wanted, graduated with honors, opened a practice in Pensacola where she treated everything from goldfish to horses. But she understood now, understood the pull that had driven her parents into uniforms and cockpits, and that understanding bridged a gap Vera hadn't known existed. Colonel Kincaid, the promotion came on her 20th anniversary in the Navy, was offered command of a training wing. She accepted, knowing it would mean more meetings and paperwork, less flying, but also more influence over how the next generation learned their craft. Her first act as wing commander was to establish a mentorship program pairing female students with experienced female pilots, giving them the network and support she'd largely lacked coming up. Lieutenant Yun, now Captain Yun, flew F-35s off carriers and visited whenever her schedule allowed, telling Vera stories about missions that were classified but important, about proving herself to skeptical squadron mates, about earning the call sign Raptor through skill and determination. "I tell all the young pilots about you," Yun admitted. "About Phoenix, who showed everyone what was possible. You're why half the women in my squadron joined." Vera felt pride at that, but also responsibility. Every success by a woman pilot reflected on all women pilots. Every failure did too, unfairly but undeniably. She'd carried that weight her entire career, the burden of representation, and it was exhausting. But seeing people like Yun thrive, knowing she'd helped clear the path, made it worthwhile. Rodriguez, now a Command Master Chief, sent her a message on the anniversary of the Syria mission. "Still telling people about Phoenix 1. Still buying drinks telling that story. You're a legend, Colonel. Thanks for everything." It was signed by all 6 members of that rescue team, now scattered across the Navy, still bonded by shared experience and mutual respect. She replied simply, "The honor was mine. Stay safe out there." Her daughter got married at 28 to another veterinarian, a kind man named Marcus who treated Maya like she was precious and made her laugh at stupid jokes. Vera wore her dress uniform to the wedding, medals gleaming, and gave a toast about love and courage and choosing partners who made you better. She saw James in Maya's smile, heard him in her laugh, and felt the particular bittersweet ache of major life moments experienced in absence. He should have been here, should have walked his daughter down the aisle, should have given his own father of the bride speech full of terrible jokes and genuine emotion. But he wasn't, and Vera was, and she did her best to honor both truths. 3 years later, Maya called with news. "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother." The word hit Vera like turbulence, unexpected and jarring. Grandmother. That meant she was old, that time had moved faster than she'd realized, that the young pilot who'd earned the Phoenix call sign was now someone's grandma. But it also meant legacy continuing, meant James's bloodline wouldn't end, meant new life emerging from old tragedy. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she managed, voice only slightly unsteady. "Your father would be so happy." "I know," Maya said softly. "I'm going to tell them about him, about both of you, about courage and service and love. They'll know their heritage." The baby, a girl named Alina Patricia, arrived on a Tuesday in spring, perfect and tiny, and already demanding attention with surprising volume. Vera held her granddaughter carefully, this fragile creature who would never meet James but carried his genes forward into the future, and felt time compress into a single moment of understanding. This was why. This continuation, this hope, this possibility. Wars were fought for abstractions, freedom, security, interests, but they were survived for specifics. This child, this moment, this love. "Hello, Alina," she whispered. "I'm your grandmother. I'm going to tell you stories about flying and courage, and a man named James who would have loved you beyond measure. And I'm going to teach you that you can be anything, do anything, if you're willing to work hard enough and refuse to quit. That's the Phoenix way." Alina yawned, unimpressed by speeches, and Vera laughed. "Yeah, kid. I get it. The future cares about the present, not grand statements." She settled into the hospital chair, holding her granddaughter, and felt the particular peace that comes from knowing your legacy is secure not in medals or missions, but in the people you've loved and taught and shaped. Maya, exhausted but radiant in the hospital bed, watched her mother with Alina and smiled. "You're going to spoil her." "Absolutely," Vera confirmed. "That's what grandmothers do. I followed rules for 30 years. I've earned the right to bend them for her." Marcus took photos, capturing 3 generations. Vera in her characteristic precision, Maya softened by new motherhood, Alina oblivious to everything except comfort. When he showed them the pictures later, Vera was struck by the similarity between her younger self and Maya, the same determined set of jaw, the same intelligent eyes. Genetics and environment twinning together to create people who didn't quit, who faced challenges head-on, who rose from ashes when life knocked them down. That was the Phoenix legacy. Not fearlessness. Fear was healthy, necessary, kept you sharp. But courage in spite of fear. The ability to see the burning world and choose to fly through it anyway, trusting your training, your skill, your refusal to accept defeat. Retirement came at 55, after 33 years of service. The Navy threw her a ceremony with more pomp than she wanted, speeches about dedication and sacrifice and inspiration. Admiral Hutchins, impossibly still serving, now head of Naval Air Forces, spoke about the Syria mission, about how one pilot had changed perceptions of what was possible. Students she'd taught decades ago, now senior officers themselves, attended and told stories about demanding standards and life-saving lessons. Captain Yun gave the final speech, voice trembling with emotion as she described watching Colonel Kincaid and thinking, "I can do that too." Vera stood at attention through it all, uncomfortable with praise but understanding its necessity. Not for her. She knew her worth, knew what she'd accomplished. But for all the young women watching, wondering if they belonged, looking for proof that the path was possible. She was that proof, living testament to persistence and skill, and refusing to accept limitations. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it brief. "I joined the Navy because I wanted to fly. I stayed because I wanted to serve. I taught because I wanted to ensure the next generation was better prepared than I was. If I've inspired anyone, that's humbling. But the real inspiration is in all of you, the pilots and crews and maintainers who do the work every day without recognition. You're the ones keeping America safe. I just got to be part of something larger than myself, and that's been the greatest honor of my life." She didn't mention James, but he was there in every word, ghost presence hovering over the ceremony. She didn't mention Maya or Alina, but they were why she'd survived, why she'd found purpose after loss. She didn't mention Syria specifically, but it was the crystallized moment that defined her to outsiders, the story that would outlive her. After the ceremony, she changed into civilian clothes for the first time as a retiree. Jeans felt strange after decades of flight suits and uniforms, but also liberating, like shedding a skin she'd worn so long it had become her identity. She wasn't Colonel Kincaid anymore, just Vera, just Phoenix, without the uniform to prove it. Maya hosted a family dinner that night, her house full of warmth and laughter and the chaos of Alina demanding attention from anyone who'd provide it. Marcus grilled steaks. Friends came bearing wine and stories. Patricia, now in her 80s but still sharp as the day Vera was born, raised a toast. "To my daughter who showed the world what determination looks like. Your father would be so proud. Hell, I'm so proud I could burst." Glasses clinked. People laughed. Vera held Alina and felt the weight of her career lift, replaced by something lighter but no less important. She'd fought her wars, flown her missions, taught her students. Now came the final phase, enjoying the life she'd fought to protect, watching her family grow, being present in ways the Navy had rarely allowed. But she'd never stop being Phoenix. That was identity now, woven into her bones. The call sign that had started as description of survival had become her essential truth. The person who rose from ashes, who transformed through fire, who refused to stay down. And late at night, when the house was quiet and Alina was asleep, Vera would sometimes step outside and look up at the stars. Somewhere up there, James was flying eternal patrol, she liked to think. Somewhere in that infinite sky, all the pilots who'd gone before were still airborne, forever young, forever brave, waiting for the day when she'd join them, and they could compare stories about the missions that mattered and the lives they'd touched. But not yet. She had a granddaughter to spoil, a daughter to support, students still seeking advice, and years of accumulated wisdom to share. The Phoenix wasn't done rising. She was just entering her final, most important phase, legacy and love, proving that warriors could also be grandmothers, that strength came in many forms, that service continued long after the uniform came off. She saluted the stars, old habit dying hard, then went back inside to her family. There were pancakes to make in the morning, stories to tell, a life to be lived fully and without regret. And that, Vera thought with satisfaction, was the best mission of all.